So what we want to talk about now is working with the computer objects within our Active Directory. We've done a lot with users. We've created users, done with groups. We've organized groups and organizational units. And now we work with computers. So if I have a domain, here's a logical representation of a domain. And there's one gatekeeper that allows people into the domain to access servers or printers or whatever objects. If I want computers to be part of this domain as well, just like I did with a server before, I have to join the domain. So you become part of the domain. Being part of the domain gives you all kinds of cool advantages. It gives you easy access to things. It can take advantage of group policy things, of giving you, drive mappings or set up your printers for you automatically. So there's all kinds of advantage to it. The downside of it is once you join it, you're also relinquishing all your control. So I am selling my soul so that I can gain all these access, other access things. And once you join, it's kind of difficult. You need somebody to release you to even let you go. You can't leave on your own. So just realize that we most of the time are going to be working with domain joined computers. They're way far easier to manage and administer, and that's what we're looking at, the network side of things. Being able to manage these devices and be able to control them and say what they can run and what can't they run and what devices you want to use on them or whatever. It's great for doing updates. It's great for doing printer configurations or file access. Not supposed to access, but the drive mappings that go along with it and so on. So when we're looking at joining the domain, we've done this already with different servers. We've joined the domain. You can watch with the process. But just emphasizing it again, if I want to join the gopa.com domain, something has to resolve that name. Like, where is this gopa.com? Using DHCP, it's getting all that information from, now this is a logical drawing right here. Let's just kind of, switch it to a physical one. Let's see, what's the best way to do that? Well, I'll just do it this way. So this is a physical network with a router. And this is virtual in our environment, but we have our own little network. This is 192.168.118.0 network. We have a couple servers on here, which are 118.12 and 118.13. So that's DC1 and DC2. By the way, these have become DNS servers just by the nature of installing Active Directory on there, because so many things are tied so tightly with DNS that it's just installed and that's what you use all the time. Okay, now let's go back to this computer. So I have this computer here and it's using DHCP to get its IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and DNS. That information is being delivered through this router, which is just like your home router. Your home router gives out the IP addresses. If you look at your DNS settings for your home computer, it's pointed to this router, and in most cases this works fine for getting out to the internet. It doesn't help us in this world though, because it's looking to here to resolve the DNS things like gopa.com. And this router over here has no idea of anything about gopa.com. That resides on these two domain controllers. Remember, they're sharing information back and forth, so it's not one or the other, they're both. And so the only setting we need to do is take our DNS settings and point them to our servers. The IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway, those are all fine. It doesn't matter what they are as long as it's somewhere on this 118 network. It knows what the subnet mask is going to be. It's the 255.255.255.0. And the default gateway is, in fact, this router, which in our virtual environment is 192.168.118.2. Normally it'd be .1, but for various reasons it's .2. So to join the domain from a computer, we want to make sure that that's going to be set first of our DNS. if in fact the DHCP is giving that information out. If your servers, your Windows servers, give out the addresses, well, then you'd program all that in to have the right DNS information right off the bat, so it wouldn't even matter. That's kind of an advanced feature, and we actually get to that right before our final exam type thing. So we're going to look at DHCP and how that's all delivered, but for now, we're just going to statically assign it just to get by with what we need to do. So, switching over to my Windows 10 machine, taking a look at this, I'm going to log in as student. If I look at the IP configuration, well, I should use the command prompt. That's the most accurate way. ipconfig/all. My IP address is 192.168.118.128, which is perfectly fine. It is being given out through DHCP. DHCP enabled, yes, up here. My DHCP server, that's the one that's actually handing out the IP address, and DNS server, here's what I was looking for. 192.168.118.2, it's that router. So we want to change that, and there's multiple ways of doing that. I'm just going to choose it through Ethernet, properties.
Should we be following along or taking notes?
TCP IP version 4. Go to properties. Leaving this alone, the obtain IP address automatically. I do want to change the DNS information though, so I click on DNS and make sure numlock is on, and I do 192.168.118.12. And my second DNS is 192.168.118.13. Those are my two domain controllers. It's kind of important to have a DNS server that's up and running. Without it, you can't really get anywhere unless you know eBay's and Facebook's IP address. It doesn't do you much good. So that's why you have usually at least two, in some cases 3 that are listed. Once I go ahead and do that, and go ahead and close, and close, and close, and let me just do an ipconfig/all again, and just, that is really slow. Looks like something from a movie.
Had it gone.
Break
3
time?
p.m.
So now that I look at this, after this finishes, it says DNS servers are 192.168.118.12. So I'm part of that. So I'm going to show you a couple things. This is just demonstration part. You can do this in a minute. Let me go ahead and actually join the domain now. So if I go to right click and the start button and go to system, I go over to change the settings under computer name and domain. And this is just like joining the other computers. You did DC2 this way, and if you already created Data1, this is the same way you did this as well. And doing gopa.com for the domain. Make sure that your computer name is correct. If not, this is the perfect time to change it. When I want to join the domain, it needs a special access. Not anybody can join the domain. You need the secret password to get entrance. And then it says welcome to the domain. So go ahead and click OK. And it's going to say you must restart before it actually takes effect. And I'm going to click restart now. While I'm doing that, I'm going to flip over to domain controller 1. And if I go ahead and log in to control domain controller 1, yeah, so it was there the whole time, so we just kept adding and removing and adding and removing it. It was just there.
Hey, I mean, speak for own.
Just the filter was on. I'm not sure why this would have ever been filtered.
Very good practice.
It is excellent practice for troubleshooting.
Phone them all the time.
Absolutely.
The greatest step in troubleshooting. Turn it off and turn it back on.
Okay, so it is part of the domain. It is on the domain controller. It's showing up just fine as long as you don't filter it out.
For me, it shows Windows 10.
So now I just want to talk about the placement of the computers. So did everybody get theirs added? So when you remove the computer from the domain, it's going to show a little down thing or whatever. So if it joins the domain, it's going to put it right back where it was before. We don't want it to do that. We're going to want to control what happens after that. So we're going to end up talking about next is the whole placement of this and why we put computers where we put them. But I won't let you finish up the whole putting it in, taking it out, and putting it back in process. Was done. Okay, taking a look at these containers, just like John said, this is exactly what he said, that this is a built-in container, not an organizational unit. And it's like, we keep talking about all these things are coming in the future, especially group policies. So it's just like, I don't get this, how does this apply or whatever. So you have to sort of like forward think to something that we haven't done yet. So just kind of trust me as we go, and then, you'll see it how it comes together later on. So, but it has to do with group policies. So if I want to do things on this computer, such as put that little logo on your screen or force that computer to print to that printer back there, I need to apply group policy. Now I can do group policies. In fact, let me just show you what the classroom one looks like. Because that's a pretty good example of how it's actually applied. So here's the group policies. If you notice, it looks just like the organizational units, but the container that says computers is not there. That's because it's not an organizational unit. So you do have a default domain policy. So let me just kind of switch back and forth. So anything that's applied to the default domain does end up flowing down into this container. So if I apply a policy at the GOPA level, it would flow down to computers, but there's nothing you can do specifically with the computer separately. And it's like, well, why would you ever do that? Well, here's an example. So we have this policy, it's called Go to LTC for IT policy, which is pretty much the whole domain, but I want to apply to these computers and apply them to a little bit differently. So the computers in Gordy's room is going to have a different policy applied to it than the one here in L119. Specifically for that printer. All the computers in here should print to that printer. All the computers in Gordy's room shouldn't print to that printer. It should go to different locations. So that's where you see often that you need to apply policies to groups or containers of objects, but the computer container doesn't give that to us. So a lot of times you'll see things like workstations or whatever. Another thing that you might see, let me just show it to you in here. So I guess kind of reviewing here again, one way of dealing with that is to making a true organizational unit called, workstations. And when you do that, moving things around as far as users go is really easy. Moving computers around is just as easy. I take Win10-1 and I throw it under workstations, and that's where it is. If there was a group policy applied to this container, that computer would then pick up those policies over time, or when it turns on for the first time, and it's going to have those things take effect. Another common way of dealing with computers is putting them with the department. So underneath accounting right now, we have payables and receivables. That's a way of organizing people, but we can also put a new organizational unit underneath here called computers or workstations. I'll call it workstations. And now, say this computer was in fact an accounting computer. Maybe I'd have it renamed Accounting 1 or something. And it actually really lends itself pretty well. So now I can put policies on a department container, and it's going to apply to all the people in there and all the computers. So I might have extra elevated security. No, you can't use USB drives or removable drives. The login out, the login restrictions might be more secure or whatever. But that's all one policy that's going to flow down and apply to all the people in here and all the computers that are in here. So that's kind of two ways of doing it. So either work with it by department or by a generic workstation area. For LTC, I know that we're in our own little unique environment here, but in reality, having it by room makes perfect sense. Just line them up. This is L121. These are the restrictions we put on there. And if you want to group them together, like, oh yeah, that whole wing is kind of all the same thing. Just put them underneath another organizational unit and apply it at that level.
But like having it named the same.
Well, it won't be named the same. It has to be named differently. You can't have two different policies name the same thing. So that's exact. And this is like jumping way ahead. This is a group policy chapter or whatever topic. But that's exactly what happens. I have this generic policy which applies to all the workstations. So all the computers this policy applies to. This policy only applies to those computers that are listed under L119. Now this just shows the policies. If I want to take a look at, what those were, I'd have to actually look at users and computers. So I have, workstations, and then L119. So that's all these computers. So I have a policy that applies to all workstations everywhere, and then I have a more specific one dealing with those in the L119 area. And again, that's kind of a whole group policy thing, but that's good to think of as we start moving ahead, like where we're going to put these different things. Okay, so knowing that maybe I want all my computers in this workstation container, what happens if I add Win10-2? Where's it going to throw it? Under computers. What if I don't want it there? Well, you can do what's called pre-staging. Pre-staging is I'm going to go here and say I'm going to put a new computer in workstations, and it's going to be called Win10-2, and it's there, and it looks just like a regular Win10-1, but it doesn't exist yet. Now, where this comes in then, and now I have to start up this computer. So your data 1 is probably showing up under computers already. Don't get rid of it. We need that later on.
Should we drag Windows 10-1 into workstations?
Drag Win10-1 to workstations. And then we're going to type in Win10-2 into workstations. And then what we'll notice is that I can still join the domain. So let me go to System. Oh, hang on. I got to check the IP addressing first. So I want to check the IP addressing, or the DNS specifically.
Wow. Looks like you're ready.
IP version 4. Property is DNS 192.168.118.12, 192.168.118.13. And I hit close, and close, and close. Okay, so now when I change, the key part here is that the computer name matches. It has to be exactly the same. Can't be close. It has to be exactly the same name. And I click the domain name, gopa.com. Well, that joined pretty quickly. And I want to restart. Clicking back over to DC1, I'm going to see that I have the Win10-2 here. If I click on computers, there's just still nothing there. And again, you probably have a data 1. I have a data 1, I just didn't turn the domain yet for whatever reason.
So we're
I pre-staged the location by typing in the name where I want it to go, and then I join the domain in the exact same process. So that is, in our case, with the change of the DNS, in a real world, we'd have the DNS already set up through DHCP. If I click on other user now, and then I go through the system, change the computer name and domain, join the domain, log in with the administrator, and now I can see I have I can have access to the network through the domain. It's going to create a domain account. So that's where I have it. If I had a group policy applied to this workstation container, the very first time it logs in, it would grab those policies and apply them, and that computer would be all set. The user wouldn't have to do anything.
Make sure we have it down working.
Yeah, we can actually pre-stage our last one as well. We want to do Windows 7-1. So I go to the container where I want to put it. In this case, I want to put it under the accounting workstations. I'm going to end up moving it later on, but just to put it someplace else, under accounting workstations, I'm going to make a new computer. And naming it is critical. So it's exactly the computer name that you're putting out there. So in some regards, it's a little bit harder this way. You'd have to really know your computer names as you're laid out. So in the classroom, it's really easy. You know, it's L119, PC11, PC12, PC13, so you kind of know it that way. So I could pre-stage them all. Once you get the default computer names, though, it's like WinXJQ39. That's a lot to type. I would just join the domain and move them. There's other ways you can do it. You can change. There's a setting you can change of forcing it to someplace else as well. But that's even more complicated.
Like it just didn't show up.
Okay, so how do you make sure that that is in fact your Win10-1?
Or
Or
-2.
-2, I should say. Because you can't have duplicate computer names in your domain.
Plus,
It would tell you,
sometimes it just don't show up.
it wouldn't let you create it. It wouldn't let you ever create that object in the domain.
Okay.
Because it's already there, it's already created. In fact, I'll do that for an example. Let me switch over to Windows 7 and just kind of, well, let me start this one up. So a couple things about noticing whether it's been activated properly or whatever. I'm going to go to my workstation's Win10-2, and if I go to properties of it, I can see the computer name, but I can also see the operating system. It actually pulls the operating system from that computer, so it actually shows that it saw something there. If I go to this new accounting workstations one under Windows 7, since it's not populated, it doesn't have a DNS name for one thing, but it also doesn't have an operating system. So you can sort of see, I wish there's a clearer way. I wish the icons would be a little bit different, you know, like show like a hollow computer or something, or having like maybe a different field on here, like whether it's been activated or not. Because you could potentially create 100 computers out here and not know which ones really exist. And maybe there's a better way of doing that. I just don't know it offhand. So anyway, here's my Windows 7-1, which I want to deploy not deploy, but join from the domain. So here's my Windows 7 computer. Join the domain is very, very similar. There isn't a system. You can't right-click, go to System. But you do have to change your DNS the same way. Properties. IP version 4. And change it to my DNS. There's many ways of getting to the same screen. The way that I do it's is to click, just left click on the start button, right click on computer, and then go to properties. And again, there's multiple ways. You can go to the control panel, system security, and system, but you're getting to the same system screen. Down here it says change the settings, and then change. I'm not going to have you do this now, but sometime during the week, just take a look at the last couple steps and just kind of play with that. Log in to several different people from the clients, change the login time restrictions and see what happens. Disable an account and log in. I think Andrew's already disabled, so try logging in, see what happens. Specify one of the clients as the only computer you can log in from. So we kind of played with that originally. I think you already did this for the user ones. But let's go ahead and take a look at a user account and say you can log in from 10-1, then go to 10-2 and try log again and see what happens. Same thing with domain controllers. You have dual domain controllers for a purpose. If one goes down, fails, or you're taking it down for maintenance, the other is still fully functional. So take down a domain controller and log in. Now be careful of that. Just don't keep logging in as the same person over and over, because that is actually cached on that machine. And the idea behind that is, like, if I have a laptop, I log into my domain at work, then I go home, I obviously don't have access to my domain. How can I log in? Because that last user account is cached on there, the last couple user accounts. If my boss came walking over, though, and came to the house, he wouldn't be able to log in because there's nothing to authenticate him against. So, but that's just showing you what you have access to. So log in as Madison, and then log in as Lauren, and then log in as Brandon, and then log in as Daniel, and log in as Sarah, with one domain controller down, and see what happens. Bring them both down, and then log in as somebody completely new again. I don't even know whatever names we have, Alexa. So just log in so people see what happens, see what errors you get. Obviously bring them all back up so everything can synchronize before you bring it down for the end of the day, though. So that's great, your kind of activities for homework.